Hello, Andrew.
Hello, doctor.
How are you?
I am good. I am definitely not in the closet per usual today.
I'm going to sound way better than you today.
You are. Unfortunately, I don't have the greatest setup today. So not only are my opinions going to be the least important on this call, but they will sound the worst as well.
Well, actually, today I'm very excited. We have a guest.
Excellent.
I'm very excited to have Miriam Mandel. She left clinical pediatrics to research and teach, and she looks at the connections between mind and body. She's been doing that for over 13 years. She sees individual clients, but most of the time her work is actually working with educators and parents in public and private schools, helping them to learn to self-regulate, self-soothe, using physiology and mindset. She supports them in learning these skills for themselves and the natural progression of teaching it to their kiddos and students by being the example. It's a win-win. It's awesome. She's going to talk about the teenage brain and vaping. So I'm very excited to talk about this. Fortunately, we don't have children who vape. I think I've scared my eldest one. Who knows with the second one? I think that she's 50-50.
The second ones are always a wild card, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Seems that way.
Yeah.
Welcome, Miriam.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, we normally record in our fancy closet because it just is small and I can put sheets up and it sounds fantastic. Not great to look at though. So this is my fancy background.
Are you in the bathroom?
It's a closet. Yeah, it's my clothes are right behind. Yeah.
I did find out though in talking to someone over the weekend that we are not the only ones that use our walk-in closet for work and podcasting.
Oh, I've done that. I've given conferences in closets. Yeah.
It sounds way better.
Well, maybe to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a board certified pediatrician. I have been out of conventional medicine though for about 14 years. I left my practice and my hospital work after my second child was born. And there was a lot of different reasons, but the primary reason was I have always really been interested in a more holistic approach to medicine than Western medicine really contributes. I am a strong believer in Western medicine. I think it's wonderful for trauma, for acute care. There's many lives that have been saved. Some of the advances that are being made are wonderful. I just felt that with how I wanted to contribute was a little bit different than what I was actually doing in my office and in the hospital. So I wanted to do more of an approach that really took in the understanding of the child and their environment, like a lot of their environment, what they were going through in their mind, what they were going through in their family life, what was really going on internally with them, because that would manifest as problems and as physical problems. So my last patient, which is it was like my last straw, really, when I think about it. I had a 5-year-old patient that had come in with twisted intestines, and he needed to get about half of his colon removed. And I was always asking the questions that I asked besides the regular history and physical in my mind were always like, what is going on with this kid? What's going on with his environment that's making him making him manifest these symptoms? There was nothing going on genetically with him that we knew of. And I know that happens, but it's a lot rarer than most people think that it's a genetic component. But what happened was, or that it's fully genetic. I mean, there are definitely genetics involved in disease, but a lot of it is not contributed as much to genetics as people really are. Like that the whole genetic determinant is really being disproven. So anyway, but I spent about 5 minutes with his grandparents. And literally within 5 minutes, I had a stomach ache. And when I say, it was, and literally, because it was a family of divorce. It wasn't the parents that were fighting, it was the grandparents that were fighting. And they were pulling me in both directions, like, don't tell this one that and this. And then you imagine like what this kid is going through. And I don't even, honestly, I don't even remember the parents or the situation with the parents. I just remember the grandparents. And it was so striking to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided that I wanted to help in just a different way. And I wanted to kind of get a little bit deeper with what was going on with these kids, because we would send them home and then they would go back to the same toxic environment, and then they would show up with something else. And when I was in residency, I did my residency in New York. I saw this a lot. There was a lot of toxicity. I worked in a pretty bad neighborhood in New York, and we had a lot of frequent flyers. And a lot of these kids used the hospital to get away from their house, you know?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I love that you brought up that example. I mean, I'm always talking about, well, even the genetic piece. I mean, that could be a whole other conversation, but I'm always saying it's more about our environment than our genetics. And it's,
Right.
If we're looking at anxiety management, resilience, it's more about what we have, including the environment that we're growing up in and living in, that contributes to the outcomes, right? Genetic, I find we get caught into this, there's nothing I can do. I hear that, especially with anxiety all the time. Parents are like, well, they come by it honestly. I was anxious. My grandparents were anxious.
Right.
We're just anxious. But then, well, it's in my blood. It's who I am. Therefore, there's nothing I can do. So I like that you talked about that. But yeah, the environment is definitely,
Because that's so not
so
true.
influential.
And that's such a limiting mindset. And when people believe that, that's what they're going to create and manifest in their life. I mean, it's been proven over and over and over again. So, is there's some, I mean, it's really hard to tease out, but I mean, the example I like to use is because everybody understands it, is this Brock gene. Like, there's no cancer gene that causes cancer. It has to be manipulated by the environment. Environmental factors have to come into play. You don't just have the gene and automatically get, because it's only, I think, a 50 or 60% chance. So what about the people who have that gene that don't manifest cancer? So it's genetic. I mean, so that's where the whole epigenetics discussion comes in, where you're really talking about the environment and your lifestyle choices and how much you manage stress and anxiety. I mean, it makes a huge difference. And I don't think people really understand that, because I think if they did, they would do more they would change, they would try harder.
Yeah.
To change. And I'm not saying that sometimes people try too hard, right? I'm sure you've been in the situations where you've seen people try too hard.
Right.
And how that doesn't work either. So I just think that if people really understood that to the extent that, say, you and I understood it, they would look for help elsewhere and not just fall into that victim mentality, because it doesn't exist unless you create that and you believe it.
Right. And the quick fix. Just get a medication and everything will be better. It's like, well, just sleep and eat good and move your body, all of those basic things. So I think we could go in already 5 different areas. So let's jump into the teenage brain. Maybe we'll start there. What you think would be really helpful. The listeners mostly are parents. Yeah. So if you were to work with a parent, what would they need to know about the teenage brain?
Well, I do teach in schools. Like, I do like parent support, parent education groups. And the teenage brain has always been a favorite. That one and sleep are always like big ones for parents, because it's just not knowing what's going on with their kids. And a lot of times when I'm able to explain some of these things, like I'm sure when you do, they don't take their child's behavior personally. And I think that's a huge win if they're able to really understand the physiology behind it and not take it personally. So one of the things that happens is during childhood and adolescence, early adolescence, really all through childhood, the synaptic connections, which are, so there's different, the different nerves in the brain are called neurons, right? And they will connect in many different areas. So it's not just one nerve cell connecting to one nerve cell. They have many different connections, and these grow and grow and grow. And they have the same amount of actual nerves in their brain, but the connections will increase and increase and increase. So it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what happens during the early to later adolescence is, more so in the later adolescence, is those connections actually get pruned or they get cut. And during that time of that cutting of it's just like kind of like pruning a tree, although the actual nerve isn't being destroyed, it's just the connections. So it's basically like the brain is being fine-tuned, and they call it in medicine, sometimes we call it adultifying. So they're actually becoming more of an adult person. And what happens is they lose up to half of their synaptic connections. So if you think about during this period, so now I'm talking about adolescence from about 12 to 25. 25 is about the time now that science is saying that the brain is, at this point of what we know, they're saying about 25 is when the brain will adultify or become like an adult brain. Although, this does continue through a lifetime. There are changes that continue through a lifetime, but the young brain will mature at about 25 years old. So if you think about that, do you remember like when your kids were young, when they would ask like all these, like when kids are like 8, 9, 10, 11, like they ask all these questions, they just ask and ask and ask and ask and ask. They just want to know everything about everything. And this is what we call exuberance, the period of exuberance where they're just gathering information. They don't even care so much about the answer. They're just gathering information and they want to know as much as they can. So these neuron and these synaptic connections are just growing and growing and growing. And then when they get to the adolescent phase, they start to prune away. And about 50% of them go. And they're starting to really fine tune. Like I said, they're starting to really, if you think about it, it's kind of like more aerodynamic. Like it's going towards what they want to do as an adult and to become an adult. So things, think about like middle school, high school, a lot of their behavior will change. They'll start to change friends. They'll start to change hobbies. All of a sudden, they don't pick up their baseball bat anymore or their tennis racket. They don't like to paint anymore. Things that they loved to do when they were younger, they're just not interested so much anymore. And what's happening in that, and people think, oh my gosh, that's awful, but that's actually a really good thing, because it's making all those things that they are really interested in, that they're using, like they're not using that stuff anymore, like the painting and the baseball. So that's going to be going. But the things that they are using, those connections that they're using for whatever it is that they really are interested in, are going to be getting thicker and stronger and more reliable, in their connections. So does that make sense? I know you're following me, but
yes, it makes sense to me too. The other guy, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The gorilla of the
yeah, I know.
here. Yeah.
All good. I'm even taking notes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that you understand.
No,
So
it's perfect.
So there's this what we call about, just like in many things, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it, right? So these neural connections that they're just not using anymore, they're going to lose. They're going to dissolve. They're going to separate, and they're going to forget how to do that. So that's why it's very important that we tell kids, and kids' parents know that what children are doing during adolescence is going to stick around. So if they're doing it repeatedly, those neural connections are getting stronger and stronger. So that's either going to work for them or against them. They want to be a professional baseball player. They want to be a professional football player. They want to be a guitar, piano, learn Spanish and do that as a living. Whatever it is that they want to do, you do it during adolescence, those connections are going to be strengthened. Mm-hmm. It also works against them, because if you start doing drugs, if you start vaping, if you start doing any kind of addictive substance, those are going to be more solidified as an adult and make it a lot harder to quit.
And social media. And I talk to my oldest about this all the time, even like this is the time to instill those habits, exercising every morning. She was great. When we had that conversation, she started working out every single morning for about 3 days. But same thing, like, social media is very addicting as well. But
yes. It would be interesting, honestly, to see what happens with this, because we don't really know, right?
Yeah.
We don't really know what's going to really happen with these kids, like this new generation of kids that were born into this, that don't know any different. And, parents kind of gave up, and everybody has an iPhone by the time they're like out of the womb. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, Andrew and I have talked about that piece a lot because we're strict. We have a daughter in grade 11 who doesn't have any social media accounts. And we've been very strict with that, just because I do understand how vulnerable how powerful the teenage brain is, but how vulnerable it is as well. And so that's been a point that we've always been pretty sticky on. So maybe just a quick question before we go into the vaping piece, but just some of the behaviors you were saying that parents might not maybe need to take it so personally because maybe their kiddos are more jerky than usual, or just what's going on behaviorally for these kiddos as they go into those teenage years.
Well, one of the, I think maybe you sent me this article, which was, I'm pretty sure you sent me this article, which is that there's a journal called Neuroscience. It was about how during the adolescent period, the teenager will block, literally, there's parts of the brain that will block the mother's voice.
Mm-hmm. Can attest to that 100%.
Yeah. It's part of their biology. It's not that they hate you, it's part of their biology. And there's a lot of reasons why adolescents do need to separate from their parents during this period of time. So if you think about it biologically, evolutionary wise, when an adolescent, and this is cross species, this is not just with humans, but cross species, if an adolescent was being separated from the species with their peers or their family, I'm thinking about it like more in terms of peers, because the peer, teens are obviously drawn to be with their peers at a certain point and pull away from their parents. And there's a couple different reasons, but one of them is it's really for survival. It's evolutionary in our genetics that if there was an adolescent that was pushed out of the tribe, they would die. So these kids, it really is evolutionary, like a point of life and death with some of them. Now, of course, that's going to vary with whatever social pressures they're feeling individually, but it is evolutionary. So if you think about it, what would happen if our adolescents didn't find their own tribe and they all hung around together and families were always kind of together and they didn't branch out and they stayed together? Evolutionary wise, genetically, the pool would be very different, right? Mm-hmm. So these kids need to push away, find their tribe, and then come back. That's generally what happens. That's what happens in a lot of the other species too. So that's kind of hardwired into mammals and, different species. So there are some different reasons. There's that's a big one though, like the genetic and evolutionary part. That's a big one of why they need to separate and why they need to really push away.
Interesting, because there's work, Dr. Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate have a book, Hold On to Your Kids, and they talk about kids don't need to be peer oriented. They should be parent oriented even in those teen years. And so they really talk a lot about hold on to your kids. But when we understand the brain's functioning, and I do a lot from an evolutionary perspective, that makes sense. They do for survival. They do need to be able to make those connections and outside.
Well, what you said is a really good point, because, and I didn't mean to sound like this, but adolescents do need adults. They need other adults in their life. Not necessarily their mother and father, even if it's an aunt, somebody in the family, or a trusted friend, a teacher, a counselor, a coach, whatever it is, they do need adults. And that's something that I don't want to misrepresent at all, because that's so important that they do need that and they want it. They actually want that. But if you think about it, look at like some of the kids, like I said, I did my residency in a part of Brooklyn where there were so many gangs. I mean, that's part of that feeling part of a group. They need to feel part of a group. If they're not feeling that in home, if they're not feeling that in their environment, they're going to find it, whether it's destructive or constructive. They will find it because it's part of their genetic makeup. It's part of all of our makeup to be belonging and part of a group. So it's just about like understanding, not taking it personally, but also having a little compassion for what's going on in these kids' lives, because they don't have control over some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are ways to work around it, right? Like if you're not feeling that connection with your peers or your family, maybe that's a good time to start understanding why and getting some help in that area.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I know we kind of struggled a little bit this weekend. I've been very sick. I'm actually still quite sick today. And I think just some of the self-centeredness, hey? I think we've been struggling with that a little bit.
I can attest to that too.
Yeah.
The one thing in terms of the kids kind of finding those other influences, the adult influences and stuff.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing that comes up is that a structure that it comes out of kind of what the parents are doing initially anyways? Like, so I look at it from the perspective of, do parents need to be trying to set up some of those potential connections via sports, via activities, via friendships with other parents of kids in the same age? Or is it something that's going to naturally happen by the kid seeking them out, or how does that kind of balance out?
That's a great question. And I think that's a really great question. No one's ever asked me that. And I think that it kind of goes both ways. I think that just from my experience, and this is just my experience, I work in a very limited population. I have worked in different populations, but the work I do with adolescent coaching and families is a pretty limited population. I think that they will seek out some kids, depending on the kid. Like it depends. Like, if they start turning to drugs first, maybe not. Right. If they find something else as a substitute to kind of numb that pain, they might not. So I think it's an early intervention is critical. But yeah, I mean, there's also the whole issue of parents that don't necessarily want their kids to be talking to other adults, which can cause a lot of problems. Something that I went through as a teenager. And one of the reasons why I want so much to help other teens, because I wasn't able to actually get that. And when I did get it, it was taken away because it was kind of like forbidden almost,
right.
Because it's then you get ego becomes involved. Honestly, like we're human, right? So it's like, well, why would you want to speak to somebody when you have me here? Like as a parent, like that's how it was with me. And there was a lot of resentment, that builds up a lot of resentment between a child and a parent. So understanding, again, it's about understanding. It's not that they don't love you. It's not that they're in a bad relationship with you. It's biology. They need somebody else they need their own tribe. They need their own space. They need somebody to confide in other than a parent. And I think when parents understand that, like I said, they just won't take it as personally and will let them do what they need to do and support them, because that's a huge thing. I mean, my clients, like the parents are so supportive of the relationship their kids have with me. And it makes all the difference. It makes all the difference.
Well, I think there's been a big shift. I mean, even from I'm assuming Gen Xers and parents. I mean, there was a lot of stranger danger. There was a lot of commercials.
Yes.
This could happen to you, right? Yeah. And so there was just a lot of that fear, even just having those other relationships. And then you're weird if like, why are you talking to that adult? Plus the therapy side of it as well, right? I think parents now are far more open and encouraging to have those relationships. So I think that's really important. And that's a good question too, Andrew. I know that's one we're going to be exploring as well, just about expanding. But I do think that there's things that we can set up, but we can't pick our kids' friends either at the end of the day. I think when it comes to our red lines, like getting involved in drugs and gangs and that early intervention is needed, absolutely. But otherwise, I think that it can be a fine line.
I was going to say, I did a post today on vaping. I did a post today about some of the symptoms and stuff that I get the calls from parents thinking they have no idea that their kid is in withdrawal. I usually get the call when the kid's in withdrawal and they're extremely irritable. They're starting to become violent with their siblings. This happened quite a bit over COVID because kids weren't able to get their vape because there was no school. So they were withdrawing and the parents didn't know what was going on. So a lot of it is not, there's a lot of things being hidden from the public, right? And if we can give these kids and these parents the absolute, like the truth, like the knowledge, and they still decide to use, there's not much we can do, right? But there's a big thing. First of all the kids that, well, not all of them, but most of the kids that I speak with, that I help coach, that are vaping, had no idea how dangerous it was. Parents don't have any idea. They don't even know what it looks like. They don't know that it doesn't smell. It's extremely discreet. I mean, kids are vaping they have sweatshirts, specific sweatshirts that are made just for kids to vape through the strings of
wow.
I mean, they have they have watches that look like you could vape. And then they learn how to do it where there's actually no vapor. So it's extremely discreet. It doesn't smell, right? It makes no noise, and they can learn how to do it where they're not making any smoke. So kids are doing it in the classroom, like literally, not even just in the bathroom, but some are doing it in the classroom. Kids have been known, I've known kids that have actually been able to vape in the backseat of the car, and their parents have no idea.
Wow.
That's how discreet it is. And, this all started, it just gets me angry because this big craze started because this was supposed to be such a great thing to help adults who smoke to quit smoking or to start vaping, which is supposedly better than the tobacco and it did help a small percentage of people be able to transition. A lot of them are dual users now, and kids too. A lot of them will go from vaping to smoking. So a lot of them start vaping and then they wind up smoking too. So it's like a lot of dual use. But they started with this, and this was the big thing. This is the health craze. This is like going to make everybody so much healthier. And then they started, there's hundreds and hundreds of flavors of Tutti Frutti and lemonade and with cartoons. And I mean, they're marketing it towards the adolescent. They're definitely marketing it towards the adolescent. And then there was a big loophole. This was just recently, there was a loophole in the FDA had to regulate all the tobacco derivative products, right? So nicotine, they were getting that. But the loophole was these companies were making synthetic nicotine. And since it wasn't coming from tobacco, the FDA couldn't regulate it. But now that loophole was closed, and a lot of the stuff has gotten pulled off the market because a lot of parents don't know this, but they have these pods, like the liquid pods that have the flavor in it. And what the companies are doing, which are tobacco companies, these are tobacco companies, like, the old tobacco companies, a lot of them have bought or have a big share in these vaping companies. But what they're doing is they're trying to outdo each other now with increasing the amount of nicotine in it. So one pod can be equivalent, one of those little pods can be equivalent to 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes of nicotine.
Wow.
And you think about it in an adult, how much that is. But when you're talking about the teenage brain, which is a completely different animal because it's not even developed, much more highly sensitive to these nicotinic receptors that we have naturally in our brain, it's going to mess with that. And that's why it makes it so much harder for these kids to quit when they're adults. It also messes with the serotonin receptors in the young brain. And that's why we're seeing more depression, because one of the questions somebody asked me today is like, is it coming before? Is it like the chicken or the egg? Are they depressed and then vaping, or are they vaping and then, it goes both ways. It's like kind of like a closed loop. Right.
Yeah.
So one question was, and this was also, I had some really good questions today. One mom asked, like, how long will it take to kind of detox from this in an adolescent? And is it different in men and women and adolescents? And as far as I know, I don't know any difference of men and women, but generally it's about, so once you stop nicotine, or once you stop the nicotine, the first week to two is pretty severe. Like that's when you're going to get the most withdrawal. Although many teens don't have as bad of a withdrawal, which is actually bad. They don't have as bad as a withdrawal as an adult. But they do definitely withdraw, and they definitely have symptoms. But it will take about 2 weeks. Once that 2 weeks passes, it will start to get better. And then after a month, their dopamine system is pretty much balanced out. So they're kind of starting with a clean slate at about a month. So it takes about a month for it to.
I was going to ask about that actually, because I know, we've had longitudinal studies with tobacco, so we can see the effects, and even long-term, if there's been long-term, long-lasting effects. We don't have that research with vaping. I just worry. I remember going to a carnival once. It was a couple, like pre-COVID. Yeah. There was always this guy who would come with pig lungs, and he was talking about the effects of tobacco, and he would show what lungs look like that have had tobacco. And then one year he came and was talking about vaping, and he's like, we don't know what's going to happen. These are chemicals. We have had zero knowledge about what this is actually doing to our lungs. And I mean, I'm always worried about the brain, right? And I do know with the tobacco, yeah, we do see the effects sort of go away over time, but I worry about the long-term effects. And if it's messing, because serotonin and dopamine already aren't working great in the teenage brain, I do worry about sort of those long-term effects.
Yeah. And there have been some long-term effects, and we know that now. And we know that like people don't understand that when I talk to my kids, like in adolescence, I'm like, listen, just think about it. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. You're taking an oil, right? It's an oil with over 60 chemicals in it. You're burning it, and then you're inhaling it. Does that sound like it's good for you? Like, really, you don't have to be a genius to realize that that's probably not a great idea, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they get it when you talk to them like that. Like they, maybe not if a parent said that to them, but like when I speak to them like that, like they're like, oh, like it's kind of true, right? So a lot of these chemicals in this pod, like 60 plus chemicals in there, are not harmful if they're not heated. But once they become heated, through the vape, it changes the structure of the molecule of the compound. So that's what they're seeing is causing cancer. It causes cancer, and it causes some serious lung damage. Like there was a while, I think they were saying it was the vitamin E in some of the, and then, like the news will change. You just never know what to believe. Unless you're reading a peer-reviewed article, you don't know what to believe.
Well, and it's hard. So what would you say to those teens then? Because they're so ingenious, and I've learned so much about vaping and how they can strip phone chargers, when their parents will take I don't know if they still need chargers to charge their vape. I don't really know all the ins and outs, but they'll strip their cell phone charger so that they can charge their vapes just by using that. But I do have students or my high school kids who will come in, whether it's vaping or marijuana use, with all the research. Look, Caroline, I'm going to try to convince you and teach you how it's safe and healthy and all of these things. And so they're so bought into that, the social media sort of sensationalizing it.
But if the past 2 years have taught us anything, though, it's that self-led research on the internet is not a viable course of action, right? Like it's unfortunate because it just falls into that it's that reinforcing belief, right? Like I'm going out and finding a reason why what I'm doing isn't wrong. And once I find those things that check the boxes I need them to check, I am not going to go back on my opinion, because that means I have to admit that I'm wrong or that what I'm doing is unsafe. It's no different than what we're seeing anywhere else. And the unfortunate part is, just in listening to this is the exact same playbook that tobacco did in the 40s and 50s.
Absolutely. Right? Because it's the exact same companies.
100%.
It's the exact same companies doing it.
100%. And it's, it's the Wild West if it's not regulated. If they don't know what's in it for now, that's 10 years probably.
Absolutely.
Before they're going to have any sort of call to action to make changes. So make hay while the sun shines, right? That's the scariest part. So they know exactly what they're doing, and they know how to play this to an audience that doesn't want to have to admit that they're wrong and wants to exert their own independence and show that they can make grown-up decisions, and all these things playing in the favor of those that are selling this, right?
They have a lot of money to make up from what 100%. They lost,
Yeah.
And they say there was actually, Dan Siegel, you must know Dan Siegel. Yeah,
I do. Yeah.
I love him. But he said that the best way to get a teen to, although I don't know if I've found this really to be true, but in his work, says this is what's true. The best way to get a teen off of that is to have them understand how much they're being manipulated, because no one likes to be manipulated, especially an adolescent. And they are being absolutely manipulated by these white collar, companies that are just lying to them. They're just lying to them. And I don't know how they sleep at night. I don't get it.
On a bed of money.
But it's all about money. It's all about money, and about the stockholders, and about, people that they have to answer to. So
to get to your earlier point, when you're talking about and trying to tie these two ideas together, when you're talking about trying to find a tribe and trying to find people outside of their parents that kids can reach out to, my assumption is that's the only way. Sorry, not the only way. That's an effective way to try and get them to show that they're duped. Like Caroline and I trying to have a conversation with one of our daughters is likely not going to have the same effect. It's going to be you're wrong, you're not cool, you don't know what you're talking about. So my assumption based on what we talked about earlier is that's when that pivotal point comes to, okay, fine. I'm going to let you talk to Miriam, who has no stake in the family and no ulterior motive. She's going to tell you why you're wrong and why you need to realize that these guys are duping. Is that that bridge over? Is that how, okay?
No, actually, because that's setting them up to not like me.
Perfect. Okay, but that's great. So not that I want them to trust me, but that's just good to know. Yeah. So how? I guess then more bluntly, how do you, when you recognize this, put them in a position to have that conversation to see that they're being duped?
Well, sometimes the parent forces them. Usually it turns around pretty quickly, though. But a lot of times, believe it or not, the kid wants to see me because I'm a doctor and because they're afraid of something physical that's happening in their body. So brain fog, and then they come and they're like, is it going to go away? And I'm like, I don't know. We honestly don't know. And I'm not lying to them. Does it usually go away? Yeah. But is it definitely going to go away? I don't know. I just don't know. Everybody's chemical makeup is different. That was, and some of these kids are like 11 years old, 12 years old. It's not uncommon. And they've started when they were 10. I have some older boys. All of my vapors that I'm seeing at this particular moment are all boys, but it's not necessarily obviously just boys. But
it's funny because a lot of my high school kids, it's all girls that are vaping. Yeah.
Vaping? Yeah. So it's just a different, and it kind of ebbs and flows with me. Like I don't know why, that's just the way it is. It kind of comes and goes, and where I'm seeing mostly girls and then mostly boys. But right now it's mostly boys.
Are you guys, are either of you seeing equal concerns between marijuana vaping and tobacco vaping? Like, is it equal? Is it just simply easier to get tobacco-based vaping, so that's where we're seeing a lot of it? Or is it where do you see it? Because in where we are located, it's fully legal. Like I can go to a 7-Eleven and I could pick up whatever I want in terms of tobacco, and then right next door I can go and get cannabis-based ones very easily. So I guess there's two parts to this question. Are you seeing it in equal measure? And is there as much of a concern in the marijuana cannabis-based vaping as there is in the tobacco-based vaping?
Where are you guys located?
We're in Calgary, in Canada.
Okay.
And marijuana is legal here?
It's legal federally, right? Across the board.
So marijuana, personally, I don't see much of a problem with it with adults. Teens, it's awful. It's just because their brain.
Yeah.
Their brain, and they're not aware. That's the thing. It's like, Mom, it's pot. It's just pot. Like, especially where you guys are, it's like it's not legal where I live. I live in Cleveland, in Ohio. It's not legal here yet.
Yeah.
But for the adolescent brain, it's detrimental.
Totally. And based on proximity and availability, it's going to be completely different for you, for sure. So that makes total sense. Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense.
But a lot of times, kids will they start with vaping nicotine, not tobacco, it's not, so there's no, it's not, it's not tobacco in it. There's not
Right. In the traditional sense.
all
Yeah.
that, like in the traditional sense, but they don't usually stop there. They'll vape marijuana. Like, why not? Right? Where are they getting the marijuana? Then we get into the whole fentanyl thing. Like, where are you getting it? Like, is it medicinal? Like, are you getting it from somewhere that's regulated, or are you getting it off the street? And, kids are dying left and right from fentanyl poisoning. So it's not too hard to scare them, because it's true. Like, this is true. There are kids dying all the time around here in some parts of Ohio that are getting fentanyl poisoning, and it's not just Ohio. I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, 1,300 people a day are dying from tobacco-based products. 1,300 a day.
Wow. I had no idea.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, and for me, like a lot of the kids that I work with, it started out with the nicotine, but ends up with the marijuana, usually, for a lot of them. And for me, it's about planting seeds. I don't think it's a one and done conversation. I think it's about listening to like having this podcast on as you're making dinner. And so they're hearing.
Good job, everybody. We solved it. Yeah.
Hearing all of these messages, right? And I think that's the way I approach it. And I did use a fear tactic with my daughter, but it wasn't me telling her. It was just me telling her stories about my own experiences of mental health issues in the family, like schizophrenia and Tourette's, but now she's terrified, right? And so it's these little messages of stories that I've had, whether it's from my personal experience, things that I see, and I have seen psychosis brought on by different drugs, right? So these messages. Now, I know the teenage brain, though, doesn't work on consequences. They don't think of the what could happen. Their brain is based on the reward, right?
More so, absolutely. Yes.
And so we got to be careful that it's not all fear mongering, but really focusing on, I mean, we've been good about making sure we've got athletic girls who know that it'll affect their functioning and their sport and their performance, right? So focusing on some of those other things have been really important for us as well.
Another thing is so many, and I hear this from ages, little ones to adults. Well, it's not like they'll say, it's not like, no, I never touch the hard stuff. Like, I ask them, have you ever tried meth? Have you ever tried heroin? Have you ever tried whatever? Nicotine, they've shown to be as addictive as cocaine and heroin. So when you present that, and I wrote that in the post today, that is through the American Heart Association. That's where I got that from their page. When you give them those facts, when they hear these facts, I've never had a kid that wasn't scared. And I never use the fear tactic, except when they're coming to me and I can't answer their questions in a way that they want me to, they get scared. Right. When I was younger, I mean, it worked for me. Like I heard that if you try cocaine once, you could be addicted forever. And I was like, I'm never doing that. That scared me. Yeah. But kids today don't seem to be as scared. I don't know. Maybe some of them are. Like my daughter's scared to death. But
well, I think that's different too. If they're coming to you and we're sharing that information, they're listening. So their listening brain is on and they're taking in that message. Yeah, right, exactly. Right. Versus if we're trying to shove it down their throats, it's just like what you're saying. They're not listening. Big eye roll, whatever.
And they're going to push against it, right? They're going to push. Not even are they not listening, but they're going to push against it and be like, like you said, you don't know what you're talking about. And yeah.
So it's creating those opportunities where they are going to start. And sometimes I've gotten to the point, it's just they're reinforced to stop, to get their parents off their back. If that's the foot in the door, just so that they can have their car privileges, I'm going to take it. And so I find I do a lot of motivational interviewing in that regard, just so that we got to find their buy-in, right? Mm-hmm. And what's going to be helpful for them. Man, I think we could talk forever and ever. Yep. Time is flying by. Is there any sort of we should probably wrap it up, but any last minute pieces that we didn't talk about that you think is just imperative for everyone to know?
honestly, if I could just get one message out, it would just be to not trust, like you said, not trust what you're reading on social media, and parents too. Not necessarily, I mean, even, like what's going on in the news, it's just so hard to know what's real. But to do their own research and understand, a lot of parents don't know much about vaping at all because it just wasn't around when we were younger. And they are, because I was too. I mean, it's not like I didn't buy into this. I did. I didn't realize that vaping was so dangerous until I did my own research. And then I started getting my clients. Like, also remember too, like this is affecting their dopamine system. When they take that inhale, they are getting a head rush. They are, a lot of parents don't know that either. Some of the kids don't even realize that they like that. It's like, it kind of numbs them up for 15, 20 minutes. Is it a painkiller? No, but some of my kids in sports, they have injuries. They like that feeling of being disconnected. Learn how to meditate. You get an even better disconnection. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing like the disconnection, like that kind of disassociation with meditation, but it's in a healthy way. It's in a positive way. It's helping your brain. So yeah, they get this temporary buzz that they like, and sometimes they'll use it for. I mean, there are some kids that I have that will use that when they're injured, and it it doesn't really alter them in the effect of like being drunk or anything, but it is a head rush, and they do enjoy it.
Yeah. And anything that rewards the brain, they're going to
Yes,
continue doing
exactly.
over and over. And that's how addictions work.
And then those circuits are going to get stronger and stronger, like we said, and then it's going to be harder and harder to break.
Well,
and the longer you start, the worse.
It's easier to take that escape and not get busted too, right?
Exactly.
Like when I was a kid and I smoked, I knew if I was coming home, they could smell it.
Totally.
You reek. What's wrong with you? And no, it was my buddy in the car. Or I was by a guy that was smoking. Or no, it was me, right? So now you get the reward of that small buzz, that relaxation, and no repercussion if you do it right. Right? That's the perfect formula for a kid.
Right.
Having been that guy that lied through my teeth as a youth.
A lot of my kids are doing it in their bedroom, and some of my teenagers, I mean, they're using it as I need it to help me fall asleep, especially the marijuana stuff, right? And so, back in the day when we were kids, there's no way parents would smell it immediately, right? But yeah,
and marijuana too, for sure,
100%. Now it's all like, why does the house smell like cotton candy all the time? Oh, no reason.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're a busy lady, but this has been fantastic. A very important topic.
It was fun. It was fun.
Awesome.
I just, if I could help one kid, help one parent, soothe them, that's what, I like to do. So thanks.
I'm sure you have today. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.